Hello, 022 group. This is D-Day part two. And I'm not sure where to begin with this because this is one of the hardest parts. I'm not going to try to get into the individual combat, and I know that may disappoint you. The reason is if you really want to know, I think there's two things you need to do. One, you need to read, and you can find them on the internet. You can find soldier stories, and I think it's important to know that. And by the way, when you get into D-Day, I think that approach, don't just read the American, because the Americans are there's going to be 5 beach landings, and 2 of them are the Americans' beaches, Utah and Omaha, named for American locations. The other 3 are a combined British-Canadian force that's going to land at Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches. So this is a joint offensive, and it's unlike anything else. I mentioned that it's the greatest amphibious landing in the history of the world, and it truly was. But I think you need to read their accounts. And the second thing, and I'm going to recommend this highly, is Ken Burns produced a series simply called The War, and it's part 5 in the video series, and you can find it. Might be able to find it on YouTube free, which is nice, I guess. But I would order it. It's wonderful to have, and it's called The Pride of Our Nation, and it's about soldiers landing. It's got some good footage, archival footage, which is very interesting to look at. But the other part is it interviews the folks who took part in the landings, and I can't do justice to those stories. Real quick, let's go back to where we last left off, and I'll tell you the D means deception. So why this matters is we left off Runstead and Rommel are there trying to agree, and they'll eventually reach to a compromise of how to deal with this. They knew this was coming. This is fallacies, and he says the Germans didn't know it was coming. The Germans knew it was coming. The problem was when and where. 2 big things. And the when and where is attached directly to weather, first and all. So there's your W's. I want to put them together. The when, where is the weather. And that's the same thing for Eisenhower. And by the way, Eisenhower deserves some study himself. He was an amazing commander. That's the one thing I'm going to tell you, because if you really dissect him and get into him, he had an unbelievable capability as a mediator, because when you start looking at the planning, it took someone of his skill. I don't think you could have put anybody else in charge. I'll be honest with you, the more you look back at this, and I think the Allies and FDR and the command eventually realized this is the right guy in the right place. And I think that's one of the most critical things in anything in life, is the right person in the right place. And what I mean by that, and what they meant by that really, is Eisenhower had this wonderful ability to mediate, to be a mediator. And the reason this is important is the type of personalities that he's dealing with. Consider the people he has to work with. These are very interesting, headstrong type of people. The first one in my mind is Sir Bernard Montgomery, Monty as they call him, is a really difficult person to deal with. He's very controversial, and he didn't really enjoy the Americans very much. But he found a wonderful way to work with him and to mediate this. And even after the war, Montgomery had some wonderful things to say about him in his personal diary and his personal messages. And so, this was very true. Montgomery gave him a lot of credit. He had to deal with personalities such as Patton. He had to deal with personalities such as Omar Bradley. He had to deal with personalities. I mean, I can keep on going with the list. But that was probably his genius. His great genius was that capability. And I think you needed somebody with those kind of geniuses when you look back at the immense amount of not only planning, but allowing people to operate at their best. Okay. But at the same time, getting the focus. And this is something Eisenhower kind of had a gift. Okay. So going back to this idea that Runstead and Rommel had a compromise, and what they're trying to decide is they know something's going to take place. They're not sure when and where. But it comes down to 2 places, and I mentioned them previously. One of the first places is Calais, and the Allies, the Brits and the Americans had looked at this very carefully about where to land. And one of the things is distance. Now, why distance matters in this is because what's really going to be one of the main things is air superiority. Rommel knew this. Rommel's big concern is the American air superiority. He had experienced this, okay, firsthand. He experienced it back when he was fighting in El Alamein and down in the African campaign. And that American air superiority, once the Americans get up in the air, they're just dangerous to those German tanks and dangerous to that German corps. So he recognizes that this is very critical. So you have to find a way to eliminate this. And this is the way Rommel's kind of thinking. What Rommel's going to do, his point is get out into the front, put an alignment against those beachheads, and really make those defenses better. And he'd been working on this diligently. Rundstedt is in the opposite direction. His argument is you're going to get them on the beach, you're going to bring them in, and then you're going to get them. Okay, in other words, Rommel wants to put the panzer divisions. These are really the key things to defy the landing. Rommel wants to put the panzers in front. He wants to put them out there. Rundstedt wants to keep them in reserve and then activate. And who complicates this actually is Hitler. Hitler gets in the middle of this, thickens this a little bit too much, and it's really Hitler's decision. Now, this is critical because whenever you study D-Day, it's in these stages and waves. And what I mean by that is you have to hit the beach. Okay, you have to get from the water to the beach, from the beach off the beach, very important, and then establish these bases. And that's what when you stand and you think about this, this is about liberating Europe. This is about invading Germany. Okay, it's not, you're just going to get to the beachhead and cling on to it. That makes no sense. So what it is this, it's creating these forward operating bases as you move along, kind of like island hopping when you think about it in a way. And so the objectives are really these inland areas. The best place to look at this when you look on a map is the city of Caen, C-A-E-N. This is the British objective. Montgomery bragged that he'll get it within a day. Hey, 7 weeks later, still trying to get Caen. And this is because of Panzer Division. Primarily, the Germans will finally bring up those reserves. And if you ever if you had the fortunate ability to listen to some of these guys, but you'll read them, especially the Brits. Nothing struck fear into their hearts more than that German 88. The 88 millimeter cannon was just absolutely devastating. And so when you really start looking at this, the combat in the waves. Now, we went back to deception. I told you about bombing the railways. There's two things I'm going to tell you real quick, and they're funny, really good stories about deception. And this is why, is it Calais or where will it be? And I told you about distance because it's the British Spitfire that's very important. It has a 175-mile radius. And so that's really something that drives a lot of this. And that's why they're going to settle into Normandy. Okay. And it's a beautiful apple region. This is what it's known for when you look at it. This is what the French are very famous for, is this apple region. Okay, so to me, I wanted to say of apples, asparagus, and mulberries, and I'll tell you what I mean by that in a minute. But the apples is where you're going to land, is over here in this Normandy region. But Calais is what they're trying to deceive. They're trying to get the Germans to think it's over here in Calais. And with this, the Brits, to help inspire the Germans to think it's in Calais, is they do this wonderful operation called Operation Window. There's all these sub windows, and so all these sub operations, excuse me, this Operation Window, and they fly planes over and they drop all this tinfoil, and what it is fooling with the German radar, and the Germans are now saying, oh my gosh, there's a fleet over here, there's these ships, there's all this activity going on over near Calais. This is it. And so that's also why whenever Normandy invasion takes place, Rundstedt, I told you, is back in Paris, slumbering away. Rommel's not there either, and Hitler's over in Berchtesgaden, like I said, probably in an inebriated, in a doped up state, excuse me. And so what happens is not till noon the day of that Hitler finally says, okay, we got to do something. That is really the key, and the key is timing, and that's what the American and British forces needed. They needed that timing. They needed that time. They needed the deception, like Operation Window, dropping the tinfoil. Okay, and the other deception they got, which is really amazing. This goes with the second thing they actually need, is the air power. So the deception, the air power, and it's not just flying over where they're going to drop in behind enemy lines with a bunch of paratroopers. They've recognized problems with this. And so what the Brits do is they start dropping these dummy dolls. They got these dolls about this big, this tall, and almost my height. And so this is these little dolls, and they're dropping them. And the Germans are being pulled over to where these airdrops are going on, and they're dolls. They're not real people. The British called them Ruperts, and so this is another diversionary. This is another deception, but this is used to that air power. But despite that, when you read about it, the Germans through Rommel, they're ready, and Rommel has put in place something very important. It's called Rommel's asparagus. This is where you get the word asparagus. There's these big, long, very sharp spikes with barbed wire wrapped around them, and so on, like this. Some of them have booby traps. And so it's meant to stop any of the gliders from coming down. The Americans also have these gliders that are coming in. They're going to go down, and they're carrying all of this equipment, heavy equipment. It's horrific to read about because guys are going to get impaled on these. Gliders going to ram into these. Rommel has also had the land flooded in certain parts, so soldiers are going to come down. They get drowned in these areas. It's really horrific to read about, and it's horrific to really see it from the first person's perspective. You can find this once again if you look for it. So you got the deception, you got the air power, and then this is that timing. It's got to synchronize. So the idea of the Allies, the idea of the Americans and the Brits, are to hit the beaches, okay, and then establish beach fronts, okay, and then get off the beach. And the bombers are coming ahead of them, ahead of all the landing craft. So it's the air power, then the landing, sea landing. And they're supposed to bomb, and as they bomb, they're supposed to create these big craters that the guys could get in, and they could then use those as a fortification in a way. This never really happened. And so what happens is a lot of times, if you've seen Saving Private Ryan movies like this, you don't quite get up to the beach. You get stuck on sandbars and stuff. You have to open the gates and you get the heck out. And then you got this 100 yards or so that you have to traverse. And one of my favorite stories where a guy, it was a 6'1" soldier for the Americans, and he got out. And I like the idea. He said, "I'm 6'1" because he said when he gets out, the water came up to his chest. Guys like me, we have no chance. And you have this pack on. So what are you going to do? And I think it'd be smart to see it from different perspectives, to see a beach master's perspective, to see a soldier's perspective, an infantry, to see a medic's perspective. They're running around on the beaches. There's some really good stories there. From a captain's perspective, someone in charge, or a major's perspective, there's some really good stories there. Some of them were tear jerkers. So anyway, waiting for them eventually are the Panzer divisions. And once the Germans realize this is it, this is the landing, now you're going to spring into action. And it becomes this idea of the Panzers are going to start operating and react. And this is very devastating to the Americans and the Brits. And the Americans end up in this wonderful, beautiful countryside, but it's got these hedges that are just enormously huge. And they're so thick, the Germans are hiding in them, and it becomes this idea of hide and seek, a very scary version of hide and seek, where the Americans easily to get ambushed. They have these 88s, the German 88s, pinned in there somewhere, and they're just blasting the daylights out of people. So when you get to D-Day, the thing I want you to understand is it's not just getting to the beach. It's not just getting off the beach. It's the real fighting. The breakout and the breakthrough takes a long time. And this is where the horror really, really, really gets on. It ramps up. Taking of strategic locations is very difficult and very problematic. You have to do that. You have to have a base of operations. The idea is to bring Eisenhower over, and then he would establish himself in a headquarters there, and then they would work and operate from that point. I'm going to stop now. I'm getting 12, 13 minutes. I told you I try to keep them short. I'm just trying to give you little segments at a time. There's some stories I'm leaving out, and I really apologize for that. But the bottom line for my 022 group is this is the key to the home front. The thing Rommel said is he feared the most. I said air power, but think on this. He said the massive material weight that the Americans will bring with them. This is why it is really important. If you look at D-Day, it didn't happen in May. It happened in June. The extra month was an extra month, not only of preparation, but really of production. And so when you look at this, the full weight of the American experience in World War II is the beauty of its military production, the output. That's the home front. And there is no segregation or separation of this case in the home front to the war. And in the home front, who's in the factories? Who's doing this? You got the women, you got the African Americans, you got all these other people who've been marginalized for quite a while. And this is a complete all-out effort. And this all-out effort gives a sense of spirit and pride. And this is something with today. You know, when you look at the United States today and the things everyone's going through, this is the sense of it. We've been there before. And there is this something to be said about the American spirit, the adversity. And this is true with D-Day, and certainly with those guys hitting the beaches and then trying to fight for their lives to get off the beaches. And then it's just begun, really, when you think about it. We have not yet begun to fight, as a famous phrase from the American Revolution, right? And so now you have to go from Paul Jones there. How dare I, Gallagher? You don't know it. I'm flipping through some pages here because I'm looking at a picture that's just reminding me of some things. Okay. By the way, the one thing about Normandy, if you have the great question, someone's always going to ask you how many died. The Americans lost about 3,000. Okay. And most people say it's not that many. It's a lot. You're going to land anywhere from 100 to 194,000, depends who you read. And this is interesting, but the Omaha Beach, what was a complication, is very long. It's 6 miles long. This is a very difficult beach. It's a hard beach too. Okay, some of these other ones were soft. This is a hard beach, and so it's a very difficult selection. But once again, that Spitfire Okay, and the deception of the Germans, this becomes the landing zone, and the choice is Normandy. The 5 beachheads must be taken, 3 by the Canadians and the Brits, 2 by the Americans. So we do share something very common with the Brits and the Canadians. We do understand June 6th, 1944 in our history. Okay, hey, thank you guys. Be safe, be healthy. I'm always thinking of you. I'm always worried about you. And please give me some feedback. I really need to know, if these are helping you. I hope they are. If not, email me, talk to me, and we'll try to keep in touch. Bye bye.